You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Julia Kim, and these are the headlines on the continent. In an exclusive interview with France 24, Mali's military junta says a transitional president will be put in place from either civil society or the military. We'll have the rest of that interview up next in the programme. West Africa's regional bloc ECOWAS announces it will send a delegation to Mali in an effort to reverse a military coup that unseated President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita. And Senegal's cashew nut industry is in crisis as exports plummet amid the COVID-19 pandemic. But we begin in Mali, where the military junta has confirmed to France 24 that a transitional president would be appointed from either civil society or the military. Now, rebel soldiers deposed President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita on Tuesday after months of anti-government protests. Both he and his prime minister are currently being held at a base outside the capital, Bamako. Well, in an exclusive interview, Colonel Major Ismail Ouagé also said President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita quit of his own accord. He didn't have a gun to his head. Take a listen.
Why did you do this coup?
The country had been at a standstill for a long time. Some Malians were suffering. There were many problems within the army. There was too much corruption. I don't like the expression coup d'etat. It was not a coup.
But he was forced to resign.
That's what you say. Did he say that?
He said, did I have the choice?
He didn't have the choice because he saw the people were suffering. But that does not mean we forced him to do that with a gun. We are meeting different parties, and then there will be a transitional council. Its leader will be either a soldier or a civilian. So I can't tell you when we will hand the power over to civilians because the council must first be set up.
What will happen to President Keita?
That's not up to us to decide. The judicial system will. That's not our job.
What is your link with the M5 opposition group?
There are no links. We are not being manipulated by a political party.
But, like the M5, you were unhappy with President Keita.
What they were saying was the truth. It doesn't mean we were with them. We had no contacts with them, but after the resignation, we have held talks with them.
The international community has condemned what it calls a coup. Are you not afraid of sanctions?
Yes, we are afraid because sanctions would hurt the people.
Will the current situation not favour jihadist groups?
That is what we fear. That is why we are asking our partners to continue to help us bring stability to the country.
And that was Colonel Major Ismail Ouagé speaking exclusively to France 24 from Mali. Now, West Africa's regional bloc ECOWAS has ended its emergency video conference demanding President Keita be restored to power. It's also announced that it would send a delegation to Mali immediately. The team will be led by former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, who had already been in talks with Keita and the opposition prior to the coup. Now, this comes after the bloc announced several punitive measures, including the closure of land and air borders to Mali. France 24's Sam Bradpiece has more.
The key takeaway from this extraordinary ECOWAS summit was to be expected. The bloc said that they were calling for the release of Ibrahim Boubacar Keita from detention and for his restoration to the Malian presidency. They also said that they were sending a delegation of high-ranking statesmen to the country in a bid to restore some kind of constitutional order there. Now, prior to these latest talks, ECOWAS had already implemented a number of measures, including the closure of borders to Mali. But also here in Ivory Coast, the Economics and Finance Ministry said that they were in line with other ECOWAS countries, cutting all economic ties with Mali and effectively until the situation is resolved. Now, it's unclear whether ECOWAS has the clout to really resolve the situation in Mali. For some time now, they've been trying to build a peaceful compromise between anti-corruption protesters and the Keita government, and that's ended in a military coup. So it remains to be seen whether they really can build a peaceful and democratic future there. member states will be especially concerned about the security situation, because in 2012, when Mali last had a coup, the instability that was generated from that event allowed terrorist and extremist groups to expand their grip on power in the country. So that's something that they really will be very concerned about.
Well, as Sam was saying there, observers fear the political upheaval will allow Islamic extremists in Mali to expand their reach. A coup in 2012 allowed militants to take over major towns in the north, prompting a military intervention led by France a year later. Since then, the jihadists have regrouped, launching relentless attacks and inflaming ethnic tensions. Earlier, we spoke to Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the UN's Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations. We asked him whether the military coup is a sign that the peacekeeping operation in Mali is failing.
I think that now is probably not the time to sort of allocate, who's to blame, who's failed, who's succeeded. I think we're in a collective effort. It's very difficult because the security situation in Mali is also impacted by crisis beyond Mali. It's a regional crisis. It also has global dimensions, frankly, if you look at international terrorism, human trafficking, weapons trafficking, etc., all kind of illegal activities that are fueling and feeding and funding those violent groups. So really, we're in a collective effort. So I think what is important really is to look to the future, help the Malian people restore constitutional order, and then make sure that having reached that goal, then we refocus totally with the Malians and all the international partners of Mali on the important and difficult task, yes, it is difficult task, of helping Mali and the region to overcome these challenges. It's a tall order, it's difficult to achieve. We are paying a price for that. The population is the one that pays the highest price. We also pay a price as UN. We have peacekeepers that have been killed and injured, but we're determined to continue our mission.
Well, let's turn now to Ivory Coast, where protests against President Alassane Ouattara have been planned for this Friday, despite an official ban on demonstrations. Alassane Ouattara's decision to stand for a third term in office sparked clashes that killed at least 6 people and wounded hundreds of others. The opposition has denounced the presence of thugs who attacked protesters with machetes and sticks. Meanwhile, a report from Amnesty International this week suggested that these thugs had acted with consent from the Ivorian police. France 24's Thais Brooke spoke to Amnesty International's regional director.
It's extremely worrying to know that armed groups who are neither trained nor regulated were entrusted to maintain order unofficially and illegally. It is even more worrying when we consider the history of Ivory Coast. It is not the first time we have seen armed civilians intervene in the run-up to elections, and we know that these groups have regularly committed violations and extremely serious crimes.
Now in Mauritius, salvage crews have begun sinking the Japanese-owned ship that leaked over 1,000 tons of oil over its pristine waters. The ship broke into 2 on Sunday after a race against the clock to pump all the remaining oil off the vessel. The government has said it would scuttle the ship in a way that didn't cause further pollution, but Greenpeace says the move would contaminate marine life with large quantities of heavy metal toxins. Scientists say the damage from the spill would affect Mauritius and its tourism-dependent economy for decades. Now, it's a small nut with a big impact on Senegal's economy. The cashew nut, cultivated in the southern region of Casamance, generates over 50 million euros and employs nearly 30,000 people in the region. Since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, exports, though, have suffered, leaving the industry in crisis. Elimen Ndao and Sarah Sacco report.
Ali, an Indian exporter, has been based in Ziguinchor since 2013. Every year he buys tons of cashew nuts from local farmers and stores them in this warehouse. The nuts produced in Casamance are very popular on the Asian market.
Bonne qualité, c'est prêt pour exporter.
But today Ali's struggling to sell his stock. The 2,000 tons of nuts he bought haven't moved an inch. This time last year, he'd sold more than 5,000.
International markets has been collapsed because of the pandemic, and it's difficult to sell it, actually, the cashew by international level. So that is the main thing. We have already bought the quantity here, and to sell, we are facing big problem now.
The situation's affected the entire supply chain. The local workforce has taken the hardest hit.
Des fois, magasin bu nekk mën na jël un nombre de 40 effectifs, mais en ce moment-là, dañu jël ba ay 10 wala 11. État bi 11 la waxoon maximum.
The whole southern Casamance region's been impacted by the cashew nut crisis, especially female workers who are usually employed to process and prepare the nuts. In this unit, a dozen women shell and roast the cashews. But due to COVID-19, these nuts will likely never be sold.
Bi ñu tàmbalee ne feebar bi mi ngi am mu fekk mu am sunu produit yu fi jóge demoon France ci benn foire genre foire bu fa amoon ñuy préparer tamit fii Sénégal fiera bi kon foofu bu nattu amee rek yàq-yàq day am parce que fekk na liggéey nañu sunu produit ñu ngi ko stocké mënuñu ko écouler.
The tasty nut has left a foul taste in the mouths of industry employees. To help the sector get through the pandemic, the government's promised 6.5 billion CFA francs, around 10 million euros, to bail out the industry.
And that's it from us here on Eye on Africa. Marco is back with the latest World News headlines. Stay tuned.